The little girl sat nervously on the edge of the piano bench, her tiny fingers hovering above the keys. She was only 8, wearing a faded yellow dress that had clearly been passed down through too many hands. The ballroom around her gleamed with gold chandeliers and polished marble, filled with the laughter of wealthy guests. At the center of it all was Charles Whitmore, a billionaire who was known for his sharp tongue and colder heart. When someone mentioned the girl's love for music, he had smirked and said, "Play for me, and maybe I'll adopt you." The words weren't meant with kindness. They were mocking, dismissive, a cruel joke to entertain the crowd of high society onlookers. The little girl, Emily, lowered her gaze, her cheeks flushed red. But the orphanage matron who had brought her whispered, "Play, sweetheart, show them." Emily swallowed hard, took a shaky breath, and pressed her fingers gently on the piano keys. At first, the notes came out soft and hesitant like a whisper. Then, as her courage grew, the melody blossomed into something rich and haunting. The room fell silent. The guests who had moments before sipped champagne and chuckled at Whitmore's joke now leaned forward, stunned. The music wasn't just pretty, it was powerful. It carried pain and hope, the longing of a child who had known too much loneliness. Each note seemed to tell her story, her yearning for a family, for someone who saw her as more than just another child in need. Whitmore, seated in his velvet chair, tapped his glass impatiently at first, but soon his hand stilled. His arrogant smile faded. He wasn't sure what hit him harder, the elegance of the melody or the raw emotion in the child's eyes as she played. For years, he had surrounded himself with business deals, cold calculations, and walls of money that kept emotions at bay. Yet in that moment, the fortress around his heart cracked. He felt something he hadn't in decades, shame. Shame that he had mocked her. Shame that he had used her hope as entertainment. His throat tightened as the final note lingered in the air, trembling before fading into silence. The room erupted in applause, but Emily didn't notice. She sat frozen, clutching her small hands in her lap, afraid to look up. She thought maybe she had failed him, that perhaps her song hadn't been enough. But then she heard it, the scraping of a chair, the steady footsteps approaching. When she lifted her eyes, she saw Charles Whitmore standing before her, his expression softer than anyone had ever seen. His voice, usually sharp and commanding, broke slightly as he said, Where did you learn to play like that?" Emily's lips trembled. "At the orphanage, sir. They had an old piano, broken keys, but I practiced every day. Music makes me feel less alone." Her answer pierced him in a way money never could. The guests watched in stunned silence. Some dabbed their eyes, others whispered in awe. For once, the powerful billionaire wasn't in control of the room. An 8-year-old orphan was. Whitmore bent slightly so his eyes met hers directly. "Emily," he said slowly, "I wasn't serious when I spoke before, but now I think I am." The gasp from the crowd was audible. No one had ever heard Charles Whitmore speak with such sincerity, let alone about adopting a child. Emily's own heart pounded. "You mean?" she whispered, afraid to hope. His hand trembled as he reached out, resting it gently on her shoulder. "Yes, I want to adopt you. I want to give you a home. If you'll let me." Tears welled up in Emily's eyes. The crowd erupted again, this time in genuine applause, not for a performance, but for the miracle they had just witnessed, a billionaire's heart transformed by the music of a little girl. Later that evening, when the ballroom had emptied and the echoes of her song still lingered in the air, Whitmore sat alone with Emily at the piano. His tuxedo jacket lay discarded, and for the first time in decades, he looked less like a man of money and more like a man rediscovering his humanity. "Play me another," he asked softly, his voice no longer mocking but pleading. Emily smiled shyly and pressed her fingers to the keys. As the melody filled the quiet hall, Charles closed his eyes and listened, not as a billionaire, not as a skeptic, but as a man who had finally found something worth more than all the wealth he had ever owned.